Derrick Lewis seems to have taken the saying, "New year, new me," to an extreme. At the start of 2023, the UFC heavyweight was seen to be a lot lighter. The Black Beast is usually one of the biggest MMA fighters on the UFC's roster. In the past, he has had to lose weight to meet the 260-pound limit for the heavyweight division. Those days may be over though, since he seems to be in much better shape now. UFC star Derrick Lewis shows off shockingly slim physique ahead of must-win fight against Sergey Spivak. UFC heavyweight Derrick Lewis looks like he's in the best shape of his career ahead of a must-win fight against Sergey Spivak. The Black Beast has been training hard and is getting ready to be the main event at UFC Vegas 68 on February 4th at the Apex in Las Vegas. Terrence McKinney, a UFC lightweight contender, recently posted a picture of Lewis on social media. In the picture, Lewis looked much thinner than usual. McKinney wrote in the photo's caption, "Derrick Lewis looks ready for welterweight," which was the next weight class up. The 37-year-old has always been one of the bigger heavyweights, and he usually has to cut weight to make the UFC limit of 265 pounds. But it doesn't look like that will be necessary next month because he seems to have made major changes to his diet and training after his performance dropped. Lewis has beaten big names like Francis Ngannou, Curtis Blades, Alexander Volkov, and Chris Daukaus. But in his last 4 fights, he has lost 3 of them. Sergey Pavlovich, Tai Tuivasa, and Cyril Gane have all recently won by knockout against the man with the most knockout wins in UFC history, 13. Lewis was hoping to get his career back on track before the end of 2022, as he was originally scheduled to fight Spivak at UFC Vegas 65 in November. The fan favorite fighter had to be taken off the card because he had to go to the hospital for a stomach issue that had nothing to do with COVID-19 or weight cutting. Lewis still wanted to fight after his trip to the hospital, but the main event fight was canceled and replaced with a fight between Ion Cutelaba and Kennedy Nzechukwu. It was quickly moved to early 2023, which worked out well, and Lewis seems to be in the best shape of his career thanks to the extra time to train. Spivak, who has won 5 of his last 6 fights against the best heavyweights, is starting to look like a real contender. He will have to be at his best to beat him. The 27-year-old's only loss in recent years was a TKO loss to Tom Aspinall. Since then, he has stopped Greg Hardy and Augusto Sakai in back-to-back fights. Previously, Derrick Lewis versus Sergey Spivak canceled as UFC Vegas 65 loses main event. The main event between Derrick Lewis and Sergey Spivak at UFC Vegas 65 was called off just hours before it was supposed to happen. On the broadcast that Saturday, it was said that Lewis was sick and had to go to the hospital. He was not well enough to compete against Spivak on Saturday. It's terrible news for the card, which was already going on when Lewis had to leave the main event because he needed medical care. Lewis versus Spivak was canceled, so the main card now has 5 fights instead of just 2. The main event is now between light heavyweights Ion Cutelaba and Kennedy Nzechukwu. That fight will still have 3 rounds. Lewis was hoping to get back on track after losing his last 2 fights by knockout. This is a bad way for his fight week to end. In February of last year, he lost a hard-fought match to Tai Tuivasa. In July, he lasted only 55 seconds against Sergey Pavlovich at UFC 277. Spivak will miss the biggest fight of his career, even though he has won his last 2 fights and has gone 5-1 in his last 6 bouts. In other UFC news, UFC flyweight Jeff Molina a suspect in betting probe. At a meeting on Tuesday, Nevada's Deputy Attorney General Joel Becker said that UFC flyweight Jeff Molina is suspected of having substantial involvement in a betting scandal that is being looked into by multiple government agencies. Last month, ESPN was the first to report that Molina had been temporarily suspended by the NSAC. At the time, the commission did not say why. On Tuesday, that suspension was extended until investigations were done. Becker said that there is evidence that Molina was involved in a significant way with the gaming scheme that is being looked into right now because it involves MMA coach James Krause. The NSAC has also put a temporary ban on Krause, who is Molina's coach, and on Derrick Minner. The UFC fight between Minner and Shailen Nerdiambek on November 5th in Las Vegas has been flagged because of strange betting. There was a lot of betting that Minner would lose in the first round and that the fight would be over in less than 2.5 rounds. This was reported by sportsbooks in New Jersey, New York, and offshore. Just over a minute into the first round, he was knocked out by a TKO. A month after the fight, New Jersey stopped letting people bet on any events involving Krause, and 2 provinces in Canada temporarily stopped letting people bet on the UFC. Since then, Alberta has taken away the ban. ESPN has heard from several different sources that the FBI has been gathering information and talking to people about the fight. Krause and Minner are both suspected because Minner didn't say that he had hurt his leg on his pre-fight medical forms. On December 2nd, the UFC let Minner go and told fighters who continued to train with Krause or at his Lee's Summit, Missouri gym, Glory MMA and Fitness, that they would not be allowed to compete while the government looked into the case. Molina has described himself on Twitter as an MMA gambling degenerate and often posted screenshots of betting slips online. In a post on social media on December 25th, he said that his suspension in Nevada was because half of the roster bets on UFC, just like me. This month, Minner told ESPN that the FBI has not talked to him. He told ESPN that he had a small knee injury before the fight that got worse while he was fighting. Minner said that a doctor later told them that he had torn ligaments around his knee. ESPN asked Krause and Molina to comment on the situation, but they haven't done so yet. Krause was a retired fighter who was once thought to be one of the best MMA coaches on the rise in the world. He had a subscription service called the 1% Club on the social media site Discord that gave betting tips, as well as a betting podcast. Since investigations began, both were taken down. Last August, Krause said on the MMA Hour podcast that he bet on every single card, just about every fight in the UFC, including some that involved fighters he trains. ESPN said last Thursday that Krause, who is 36 years old, also worked as an agent for an offshore sportsbook called abcbetting.ag. People from the US who worked as agents for offshore sportsbooks have been charged with crimes like not paying taxes, running an illegal sports betting business, and laundering money. Next up, Jon Jones. Ciryl Gane title bout set. UFC releases Ngannou. Jon Jones, who is arguably the best fighter of all time, will fight Ciryl Gane for the heavyweight title at UFC 285 on March 4th. UFC President Dana White said on Saturday, the UFC couldn't reach a deal with its former heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou, so the news came out. Jones hasn't been in the octagon since February 2020, when he fought Dominic Reyes to keep his light heavyweight title. Jones gave up his title soon after that fight and hinted right away that he was going to move up to the heavyweight division. The UFC and Ngannou talked about a new contract for almost 2 years, but they couldn't come to an agreement. White says that the UFC offered Ngannou a deal that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight in the company's history. But Ngannou, who's 36 years old, turned it down. White said that Brock Lesnar, who retired in 2017, is still the best paid heavyweight in UFC history. White said, "I've told you guys this before. You don't have to be here if you don't want to be. I think Francis is in a place where he doesn't want to take many risks right now. He thinks he's in a good place to fight weaker opponents and make more money." ESPN asked Ngannou for a comment, but he didn't answer right away. Jones, 35, has a record of 26 wins and 1 loss. He is considered by many to be the best fighter of all time, along with Georges St-Pierre, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Anderson Silva. In 2011, at age 23, he became the youngest UFC champion ever. From 2011 to 2020, he held the light heavyweight championship on and off. White said Jones was ready, willing, and able to fight any heavyweight, including Ngannou. Jones briefly talked about the matchup in a video that Twitter user Michael Onceover put on social media. Jones said he hoped that Henry Cejudo, a former UFC champion and Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, could corner him in the fight. However, Cejudo is also likely to fight in the coming months. White says that Jones also signed a new 8-fight deal with the UFC. This is in addition to the heavyweight title fight. Jones was arrested in Las Vegas in September 2021 and charged with misdemeanor battery on a family member and damage to or tampering with a vehicle. Jones was in Las Vegas to get a Hall of Fame award. While there, he talked about his upcoming fight in the heavyweight division. In the end, the domestic battery charge was dropped, and Jones pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of damaging property. Gunn, from France, has a record of 11-1 and was once the interim heavyweight champion. In August 2021, he beat Derrick Lewis and won the title. In January 2022, he tried to unify the belt against Ngannou, but he lost a 5-round decision. In his last fight, which was the main event of a UFC Fight Night in September, he knocked out Tai Tuivasa. The UFC 285 pay-per-view event will happen at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. I am sure you are all as eager as I am for the Black Beast's next matchup, just to see if his new fitness philosophy has done him any good. Well, that's all the time we had for today. Thanks for sticking around. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Cheers!